Hello, everyone. Today's story isn't about monsters hiding under your bed. It's about the ones hiding in plain sight. Three true nightmares where the victims begged for help, and even the police couldn't save them. So keep your lights on, because what you're about to hear is very, very real. It began with a family moving into an old countryside home, one that had stood empty for decades, its walls soaked in damp and whispers. The villagers warned them about the house, saying it had a history that never stayed buried for long. But they laughed off the stories, convinced that ghosts were just tales meant to keep children inside after dark. The first night was silent, almost too silent, the kind that presses against your ears and makes you listen harder. On the second night, a steady tapping began, faint but deliberate, coming from inside the walls behind the kitchen. They blamed the old pipes, the wind, or mice scurrying through forgotten tunnels. But when the tapping turned into slow, dragging sounds, like fingernails tracing along wood, unease settled in. They called the police, thinking maybe someone had broken in or was hiding somewhere inside. Officers arrived, searched every room, attic, and basement, their flashlights cutting through the dust and darkness. Nothing was found, but one officer remarked how strangely cold the house felt, even though the fireplace was burning strong. The family tried to move on, convincing themselves that fear was playing tricks on their minds. Yet, every night, the house grew louder, as if it had found its voice again after years of silence. Doors opened by themselves, lights flickered, and heavy footsteps echoed across the upstairs hallway, even when everyone was downstairs. The youngest child began waking up crying, claiming someone was whispering to him from the corners. They stopped sleeping properly, too afraid to close their eyes, too afraid to stay awake. When the father called the police again, they hesitated to respond, already tired of false alarms. Two officers finally arrived, but this time, something in their faces changed the moment they crossed the threshold. Their breath misted in front of them despite the warmth of the room, and one of them swore he heard a sigh coming from inside the walls. They searched again and again, every cupboard, crawlspace, and floorboard, until one of them said quietly, "This place doesn't want us here." The police never came back after that. They wrote it off as superstition, told the family to get the wiring checked, and left. That night, the noises became unbearable. The walls groaned like something was moving within them, something alive, something restless. The father decided to find the source himself, hammering through the plaster where the sounds were loudest. Behind the wall, instead of pipes or rodents, there was a hollow space, a hidden corridor stretching along the house's foundations. Dust filled the air as he crawled through, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The narrow passage seemed endless, lined with strange carvings scratched deep into the wood. Halfway through, he found what looked like a small door, bolted shut from the inside. He heard breathing, steady, close, and then a low whisper that didn't sound human. He stumbled back out, sealing the hole again, but from that night onward, the noises came from the inside of every wall. Days turned into sleepless weeks. Objects began moving on their own, chairs dragging across the floor, cupboards swinging open violently. One evening, the mother found muddy footprints leading from the basement stairs to the kitchen sink. No one had been downstairs. The air smelled of earth and rot, as if the ground itself had risen up to breathe inside their home. They packed their bags, desperate to leave, but every time they tried, the car refused to start. The phones stopped working, the windows wouldn't open, and even the front door jammed shut from the inside. They were trapped, surrounded by walls that pulsed faintly as if the house itself was alive. The whispers grew clearer now, dozens of voices murmuring together, too soft to understand, but too close to ignore. They stopped talking to each other, speaking only in glances, too scared to admit what they all already knew. One stormy night, Thunder rolled across the fields and rain hammered against the roof. The father gathered his courage and broke down the door to the basement, determined to end whatever haunted them. The air below was heavy and wet, filled with the smell of decay. At the bottom of the stairs, the flashlight flickered, revealing a stone floor stained black. In the far corner stood a small wooden box, nailed shut, with symbols carved into its lid. Something inside the box shifted. He turned to run, but the basement door slammed behind him, trapping him in total darkness. Upstairs, the rest of the family heard the muffled sound of screams swallowed by the thunder. Then silence. When they finally managed to open the door hours later, the basement was empty. Only his flashlight lay on the floor, still glowing faintly. They called the police once more, this time sobbing and begging for help. The officers arrived at dawn, their faces pale as they entered the house. They searched the basement but found no trace of the missing man. One officer noticed the strange carvings on the box and reached to open it, but his partner stopped him, saying it was best to leave. They left quickly, refusing to write a report, warning the family never to return to that place. The house was sealed, left to rot again, standing silent under gray skies. No one came near it anymore, not even the curious teenagers who used to dare each other to knock on its doors. Those who tried swore they heard voices calling from inside, whispering their names through the cracks. Years later, when new owners bought the land and tried to renovate the house, the workers refused to continue after the first day. They said the walls moved, that they heard breathing through the plaster, and one of them claimed to see a hand pressing out from inside. The police were called one last time, though no one expected them to come. When they arrived, they found the house completely empty, yet the lights upstairs were still on. The lead officer, a man who had visited the place years ago, hesitated before stepping inside. His radio crackled, and through it came a faint, trembling voice, his own voice recorded from years before, whispering the same words he had spoken the first night he'd entered. "This place doesn't want us here." The transmission ended, and so did the record. To this day, the villagers still avoid the road that leads to that house. They say sometimes, when the wind is low and the fields are quiet, you can hear tapping coming from beneath the earth, like something still trying to get out. The police never listed it as a crime scene, never mentioned it in their reports, as if the house had erased its own story. But some say the sound hasn't stopped. It only waits, because once the law left that place, something older, something unspoken took over. And whatever it is, it doesn't fear badges, bullets, or prayers. It only fears silence being broken, because when the silence breaks, it wakes again. Chapter